Many ways to look at this thing. Well, I'll look at it the way that it really stares us in the face. Ukraine did noble, just like you said. I agree. I think you also said that. Ukraine did what any country should do, and that is donate 25,000 tons to Nigeria, as part of its Grain from Ukraine initiative. And people have thanked them. So I also add my voice to people who have thanked them. But the back and forth has been represented by two people. One is Mr. Peter Obi, and the other one is the federal government. All right. So Mr. Peter Obi somehow represents, because when you read our papers, Mr. Peter Obi represents all the people who see that as an insult to the country. And so that argument says that how could Ukraine, a war-torn country, have capacity not only to feed itself, but donate 25,000 tons to Nigeria and maybe some other countries. But for this very initiative, it was for Nigeria, and it has been received by Nigeria. And he thinks this shows failure of the government to invest in agriculture. It shows that Nigeria is a failed state, that kind of attitude. The first person who enlightened the federal government to respond was Reno Omokri. Reno Omokri put up a deceptive, very deceptive, and maybe ignorant post where he said there is no problem with this. And he gave an example with Egypt. And he, trying to mock Mr. Peter Obi, he then said, here is Mr. Peter Obi who was talking about Egypt when he was campaigning. Yeah. Mr. Peter Obi, yes, did cite Egypt as an example when he talked about how that country has been able to generate power.
Yes.
And he went to Egypt to study.
Yeah, he went.
And is it true that Egypt, a country of about 109 million people, has been able to power her country and have surplus power? Yes. So Mr. Peter Obi was right on that score. But is it also true what he said, that Egypt imports from Ukraine, not as aid? So, that was the ignorance and maybe intentional ignorance. I don't know why. I don't know which category he falls into. Egypt buys from Ukraine and Russia. All right. So that is it. And so he said, if that happens, so maybe it's even part of what they imported from those countries that they used to feed him, that he's now looking fatter and things like that. And so immediately we saw yesterday the Minister of Information at the leadership conference come up to also say the same thing, that there is nothing wrong with that even Egypt buys from. But why I say it is ignorance and a shame that we have people like our leaders, because he represented the president, that we could have Mr. President who will want to solve the problem to say that it's just to look at both countries, to look at the Nigeria, look at the Egypt, and then look at the Ukraine. So we look at modern Nigeria, giant
of Africa.
So let's look at the giant of Africa. The giant of Africa has an agricultural land mass of 70.8 million hectares of agricultural land. Giant of Africa. And so this is not the first time. Maybe it is in the open now because Ukraine is fighting and it is Daesh, right? But then before now, Nigeria spends about $10 billion importing agricultural foods from around the world. Russia, Ukraine, South Africa, US. If Ghana starts, we can even import from Ghana if they are serious. If Ghana takes agriculture seriously, we can start importing from them. So Nigeria does that. So you look at something like rice, for instance. Okay, the rice we consume in Nigeria has been estimated to be about 6.7 million tons. Nigeria produces just about 57% of it. Just about 57%, depending who you want to believe. But then the truth is, Nigeria imports, either through smuggling, through importation, however we get it. Nigeria needs in excess of 3 million tons yearly to feed, just to meet our food needs. Then we now look at the Ukraine. because, you know, we are 70. The giant of Africa, I don't know who giant of Africa is, but the giant of Africa has about 70.8 million, right, agricultural land, of which, if you look at it, maybe 34 million is arable. But then you look at the Ukraine, where this is coming from. Ukraine has 41 million hectares, while we have 70.8.
Yeah.
So Ukraine, that not only produces and meets her need, even during the war, but also sells massively across the world and gets hundreds of billions of dollars from the sale of agriculture. They have, you know, then when you look at, they have about 41 million. Then when you look at their arable land, that's about 55% of their land. So you are looking at Nigeria having arable land that is over twice the size that Ukraine has. All right?
Yeah.
Even in war, not only is she food sufficient, but she's also looking at people and pitying people and doing sadaka for people. Then we look at the country they've compared us with, and that is Egypt. And that is, you know, that where, you know, when I was listening to the Minister of Information yesterday, you know, I was ashamed for my country, and I cried for those poor children. Egypt, that they are and the minister came up to compare, the President Tinubu came up to compare us, because that was his speech. The minister
represented by the minister.
Yes. The agricultural land of this country is 3.7 million, thereabout, about 3.7 million. But the arable land for that country, okay, 3.7 million, but then the arable land for that country is about 2.7 million hectares. All right? 2-point-something million hectares. We have 30-something million to farm. And Egypt. So they're comparing us with a country that if you bring the land they have for agriculture, all right, bring it, we, you know, 10 times, Nigeria has more than that. And then you're looking at that small size they have, and they have a population of 109 million. So that tells you that the pressure on land in this country is much. But the pressure on land on Nigeria, 220-something million people, this vast land, we can cultivate and cultivate and cultivate and cultivate. They conveniently do not talk about that. But then the sad part of it is that even though Egypt has this little piece of land available for them to invest in agriculture, Egypt is able to provide over 40% of the need, of the wheat need of her country. Over 40%, even with all of these challenges. And like I said, what Egypt does is, just like we talked about the investment they've made in power. So there is nothing wrong. When God has not blessed you with something, you buy it.
Yeah.
When we're in secondary school, we are taught comparative advantage. Comparative advantage says a country should not focus on producing everything. Focus on that if you have advantage. So if you spend little money on this, you can produce lots of this. And then buy from countries like, for instance, USA, you don't have oil. But what do they have? They have military. So they can start war in your country. Look at all the countries where US have soldiers on ground. You look at one thing, they have a resource America needs for her industries. So they send soldiers there, they spend money on military, and in the end, they have oil. It's simple arithmetic. So Nigeria has failed to invest in agriculture where she has comparative advantage. And Nigeria is comparing herself not with Israel, that Israel is in the desert. Israel does not only feed herself, but Israel exports food. Nigeria is not looking at Israel, no. Nigeria is looking... but Israel is small. Israel is small. And Israel is in the desert. Okay, so I use Israel as an example. Look at the reason why they talk about the Fulani moving Atoro from Katsina to Enugu and killing everybody from the road. What did they say? They say dry season, right? They say it's dry season, and this is where we have grass. Israel is in the desert. Israel farms, produces crops. Israel produces livestock with irrigated water. So all our northern states, 19 northern states, have not been able to, they're not in the desert, but they've not been able to think out something to do and ensure that they can. So this is what people like Mr. P2B are calling attention to, that we have no business getting sadaka, like you called it, from Ukraine. So it is just to put it in perspective that that comparison is the most stupid thing anybody who has a brain. But sadly, they're in government, and government always knows better than everybody, including me sitting down here. Yeah. Looking at Nigeria, can we surmount this problem if there is focused leadership? Yes, Nigeria can surmount it. And I mean, 70% of Nigerians are involved in agriculture. 70% of 220 million, we don't know how to count, so we don't even know how many we are. But what we all seem to agree is that we are over 220 million people. So if we have 70% of our population involved in agriculture, especially subsistence, because that is what is very important. What is important is, agriculture for farming things that we can eat. Then it tells us in, I think, 2022, sometime in between November and December, when the then administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, at the height of people complaining about his failure, they carried out a survey around the 109 senatorial zone. And even though some of the things they said was funny, but I'm just looking at, the figures they came up with. And the figures they came up with was that over 71% of Nigerians actually live in the rural areas, and that is where poverty is most. And when they looked at the states, you found out that some states, for instance, Sokoto, 91% poverty, the state with the highest poverty rate. They looked at that. Yes, why they actually did that then was that they were blaming state governors. They were trying to say, see, we as a federal government, we've tried. We've done our best. We've done this, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this. But these state governors are not really developing the rural areas. So the point I'm trying to make, I'm not saying everything they said. The point I'm just trying to make is, it shows Nigeria's capacity to rise up from this ash that the government has put us. And why must we do this as an emergency? Today in the news, the IMF, your friends were talking about Nigeria, that the federal government must take agriculture as a priority. Why must the federal government take agriculture as a priority? It looks bleak. When you look at the economic outlook for Nigeria, it really looks bleak. For instance, Save the Child, as an organization, they have told us that 700,000 Nigerian children are going to die of hunger, starvation in the country. That is troubling. Very, very troubling. Also, when we look at the World Bank, this Ukraine, this aid coming from Ukraine, the Grain from Ukraine initiative, when you look at the fact that it is the World Bank that is distributing this, the World Bank had told us that 7 states in the country, Borno, Adamawa, Yobe, Zamfara, Katsina, 7 states, Kaduna was also one of them, were going to face famine in 2024. It's scary. The Food and Agriculture Organization told us that over 26-point-something million Nigerians are going to face acute food hunger. Adding that to the 133, million, because they've definitely increased. I don't know how many they are now, but as at last year, 133 million Nigerians in abject poverty. So when you look at all of these statistics, it just tells you one thing, that even though Nigeria has vast land, beautiful weather, potential, Nigerians who are serious to go into agriculture, who are actively in agriculture but need lots of support. With all of this potential we have, the only missing link there is simply leadership. A leadership that is focused, and rather, focused on ensuring that they help Nigerians with the basics. agriculture, basic production to meet people's needs, and not flyovers. Because when you look at where the government is investing, or some people say using as a channel to siphon the wealth of this country, you're going to look at all of these boogie projects like flyovers, bridges, superhighways, airports. You look at all of these kind of things that really do not impact in the people, and then telling us about transferring 25,000 naira to 50 million people we can't trace. We don't. When you look at how much, when you look at how they are focused on foreign travels to go private visits, signed documents, and all of these things. Now, they travel first class when they are not traveling jet. Because let's not talk about private jet and how expensive it is, but let's talk about the one we can verify how much they go. So when they are flying first class, the least is 12 million naira per ticket. So when you're flying first class, the least to all of these countries they go to, the least 12 million naira. Now, when you look at how many people are on that delegation, right? When you look at how many people are on that delegation, let's not begin to talk about hotel. Hotel. No, please don't talk about that. Don't talk about that, because you will run mad.
No.
And the
security details. Their transportation.
Okay, if you want to talk about their transportation, you also talk about their shopping needs. If you also talk about their shopping needs, you also talk about the ASA needs.
And the side.
Somebody said yes. So when you it is money. It is hard work.
It's friends, yeah.
So I mean, if his father, you remember when the video came out, when they go to what's the name of this country, where they went to the intelligentsia group that set up a debate for, not actually a debate, for Nigerians to come and present their, what's this called? Chatham House. Okay, you remember there was this video in Chatham House, after the Chatham House, or is it before this presentation, when they were with a set of people and they were dancing? So all of these monies, so many Nigerians think, so many people think that the best thing to do, focus on agriculture. If you focus on agriculture, the people can feed. Then after the people have fed, then you can begin to talk about super bridges, super highways, airports, and all of that. But for now, focus on food. So if the government does that, we have everything. We are blessed with everything that will make us, in 2 years, we don't need a long time, in 2 years, be able to feed Nigeria. And security, of course, is one of them. Look, anybody who thinks insecurity in Nigeria is a joke, SBM Morgan, you can't fault the analysis and their statistics. They've said between July 2022, July 2023, 5 billion naira was demanded in ransom. 5 billion naira was demanded in ransom. And they said Abuja is the 11th, is it 7th or 11th most terrorized city in the world. The city, with the highest number of abductions. Abuja.
How about that idea? How about that idea?
No, this is not a city. They are talking about cities. Sokoto is not a city. You understand? Okay. So if they had what it takes to know what happens in these other areas, then you can imagine. And all these areas are where we have farmers. Benue, all of this, Niger, Kaduna, Southern Kaduna. This is where you have farmers. Anam, Anam people also complain about herders and what herders are doing to them. So if the government can handle security, be serious about agriculture, not this kind of intervention funds, but be serious on agriculture. In 2 years, Nigeria will come out of this mess.
Maybe next year, self.
I believe that.
This year, next year,
I agree. I completely agree. So that's it.
I support